34,911 all of a sudden are Brian Holman fans. They are sitting in on perhaps history here tonight. So here we go.
There's really no such thing as perfection in the game of baseball.
Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. Okay, so today I have a guest with me here. This is Terrell, and he was a student in my little documentary class last spring. So how's it going, Ben?
It's going good. Just my third semester here at Biola. It's been a lot of fun. Production 1 and 2 is still definitely up there for one of my favorite classes.
For as long as I can remember, filmmaking and baseball have been driving forces in my life. I played the game of baseball from t-ball through high school, and it's genuinely changed the way I pursue anything in life. For the final 2 seasons of my baseball career, my pitching coach was Brian Holman. Brian became my pitching coach quite simply as the result of a Google search looking for popular pitching coaches in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it seems almost funny to say, but the impact that this has had on my life ever since has been nothing short of profound.
All right, and so where do you want to go in the film business? What's your kind of which way are you leaning these days?
So my emphasis is in directing, and I do think that's my ultimate goal, whether it be documentaries or narratives. Narratives have been like the big goal for a long time, but doing this documentary, it's definitely kind of opened up my eyes to how many stories are out there that can be compelling that a lot of people haven't heard of. But yeah, directing's the ultimate goal, but I love editing. I think that's the thing I have the most experience in, been doing the longest, and the world needs more editors than directors, I would say. So those are the 2 big goals right now.
Yeah. Okay, great. So for everybody watching, how this came about was Ben was in the class, in my documentary class, which is an intro class. And it's only 5 weeks. You have to make a documentary in 5 weeks. And he pitched what I thought to be a pretty ambitious project.
Coaching has been a passion of mine for over 30 years because growing up, coaches were a huge influence in my life. My favorite thing about coaching baseball is watching kids develop, not just on the baseball field, but developing as young men and seeing them mature and grow. And, baseball is a great metaphor for life. And so baseball really prepares them for life in the real world. And most of them are not going to be major league players, but I love to see what they're going to be like, 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the road when baseball's over. So I first met Ben. Ben was a great kid. He was all smiles and happy, and he was a raw player, had a lot to learn and had a lot to teach him, but he picked up things very quickly. When I think about his baseball career and where he is now and what he's doing now, baseball, again, was just a stepping stone to get him to where he is now and the success he's having at Biola University.
And wound up in the 5 weeks making one of the best documentaries that has ever come out of the class.
Oh, thank you.
What was the award that you won with the school?
It won Best Documentary here at Biola.
Okay, so won an award, and it's done now. You said 11 festivals, right?
Yeah, 11 festivals in total so far. Nearing the end of its festival run, but has a few more to go, and we'll see where we end up.
Okay, great. So it's a 15-minute piece, and I just thought it would be fun to have you on and have you talk a little bit about how it came about.
Brian is easily one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Even beyond his career as a major league pitcher, he has led a truly remarkable life. And because of this, from very early on in our relationship, I began quietly developing ideas in my head for a documentary centered around Brian's life. Currently, I'm 19 years of age, and I just finished my freshman year at Biola University, a school that was fatefully introduced to me by Brian himself. When the opportunity to finally create a documentary about Brian arose in the form of a class project, I called Brian on the phone, and I proposed the concept of Almost Perfect the 99th Pitch.
Well, I really didn't have any expectations. I didn't really know what to think. I honestly, this is going to sound weird, didn't realize Ben was this talented when he asked me to go do this. And so when we went out to start filming in California, he was very meticulous and very professional. And when I saw the finished product, I was pretty amazed.
Due to the class's impending deadline, the schedule for finishing the film was extremely tight. Within 8 days of the project being assigned, we had flown Brian from Texas to California and wrapped principal photography. After converting his VHS tapes from the 90s to digital media, and also flying back to Texas for additional B-roll, I locked myself in my dorm room for days on end and edited the film. All things considered, the entire documentary was completed within 6 weeks.
So why don't you explain sort of what the film is and how you came to this idea?
So yeah, I played baseball from like the age 4 to 18. My last season was senior year of high school. For a while, I considered playing baseball in college. And for the last 2 seasons of my pitching career, my coach was Brian Holman, who is the subject of the documentary I made. And his son went to Biola University in like 2011, and he played baseball and was also in the film program, and he just loved it. So Brian actually just recommended me Biola in one of the pitching lessons. I'd never heard of Biola University. And I ended up coming here and touring the film program as well as the baseball program. And I think I always knew deep down that film was ultimately my bigger passion. But I explored a few universities, saw what I wanted to do. And even when I decided film was definitely the path I was going to take, I was still highly impressed by Biola University. So ended up coming here. And that is a cool, I think, extra kind of sugar on top of the documentary, is that Brian did have this impact on my life that's not really explored in that documentary. But not only did I make the documentary about him that has, I think, helped my career, but he also, his guidance led me to the school that I'm going to be for the next few years, made all these connections because of him. So I had this idea for a documentary about Brian for a long time. I've always told him he should write an autobiography, because if you look into like his entire life, he's been through so much. He has so many fascinating stories. I mean, you can talk to him for like days on end and he'll never run out of these super compelling stories. So I always wanted to make a documentary called Almost Perfect about him, because if you look at his life, he's been through so much tragedy, so much adversity, but he's come out the other side. So the name Almost Perfect kind of had this irony to it. So that was the original idea like 2 years ago. And when I was supposed to make a documentary for this class, that was of course one of my initial ideas, but I knew it had to be a short film. So that kind of altered the course of the documentary into being exploring his life through that one game rather than looking at his whole life. So I called him on the phone, I think like a day after it was assigned, pitched it to him, and then within 8 days in total from the project being assigned, we had wrapped principal photography and just flew him in and did it really quick.
Yeah. Okay. So to fill in the gaps, Brian Holman was a Major League Baseball player, pitcher for the Seattle Mariners. And the game in question was in 1991.
1990.
Right? 1990 against the Oakland A's, which at the time was the best team in the world.
Yeah.
So you knew the story, and I'm not going to spoil the story here, but basically this game, he had a chance to throw a perfect game. He was getting farther and farther into that game with 3 up, 3 down, 3 up, 3 down every inning. And you got access to the footage. He had a tape of the footage, right?
Yeah.
So you could cut to the game and you could use his interview. And so what I was impressed with, especially, coming from a student, was your pacing. So you have the payoff. What happens at the end of the game, and you're saving that from us, but you're building up this tension, and there's a lot of things that you have to accomplish to do that. So the audience needs to know, okay, he's a Major League Baseball player. They need to know this is the Oakland A's, the best team in the world at the time, and the meaning of a perfect game. How many people have ever thrown a perfect game in Major League Baseball history? Very few. And then all of these conventions that happen in baseball where, they stop talking to the person because they don't want to jinx it because baseball players are very superstitious, et cetera, et cetera. You use the interview for him to explain all that stuff, and then you cut back and forth into the game. So you get to see him now, and then you get to see him when he's mid-20s or early 20s when he's actually pitching. And every moment that he talks about, you're able to show us footage from that game. And I think the skill that you displayed really was in pacing it out for us and keeping us pretty much on the edge of our seat that whole time, and in anticipation of that perfect game, and him explaining the significance of it. So what would you say your approach was in terms of how to accomplish all that?
For a pitcher, though, throwing a perfect game is like the proverbial unicorn. It's extremely hard. It is a very rare feat that you never think about, you never think it's going to happen, and when you get to that point where it's happening, you're like, wow, this is pretty crazy stuff.
So yeah, I knew that it was definitely important to establish kind of the elixir of the story, which in this case is the perfect game. So to really build up how meaningful this is to a player, it's kind of symbolic value of their career. Like if you throw a perfect game, you probably are going to get in the Hall of Fame. It's something that's so rare. It's this extreme achievement. And also, I think I was also considering that most of the people who were going to watch the documentary, at least at first, probably didn't know what a perfect game was. I mean, when I pitched this idea to a lot of my classmates, they asked, "What's a perfect game?" So I think maybe that also helped me go down that direction. But overall, I just think it's important for the narrative to build up what he is going for. Because that's, I think, every story. Someone has a goal. So the goal is a perfect game. So I really wanted to make that something that you want to see him get.
It sounded like a 747 going over your head. It was so loud, it was vibrating, and it literally felt like the earth was shaking. It was an incredible feeling.
And so, and did he pretty much, he's kind of a motivational speaker type of a coach. So I'm sure that he's pretty much perfected that story.
Yeah.
So did you just kind of like let him run, or did you kind of give him some guidance in your interview?
So I actually wrote a script for the documentary, and it's not a script of what he's going to say. It's just structured out the documentary. So I had like 5 questions at the beginning, which kind of all went back to the idea of why is a perfect game so important? Had you ever thought of a perfect game? Stuff like that. And I asked him those questions. Most of those questions I only asked once. A few I had him go back to a lot, just so we can get those, because I knew I needed a lot of good sound bites just for the first 3 minutes of that documentary. And then I just said, tell your story. We did 2 takes of that. And then I had a few questions at the end, which he just like killed first time, of me just kind of getting to the end of the documentary when the message is more inspiring. So it was more questions. It was more thematic questions towards the end.
Yeah. So again, without spoiling what happens in the game, you wound up with him, some footage of him coaching. So you had the early footage, you had the interview footage, and then you had some B-roll of him, in the batting cage, doing his current coaching and talking about how he passes on the lessons that he learned in baseball.
And so I tell a lot of kids now as a coach, I said, you have a forget about it bucket sitting beside you. And every time you make a mistake, you throw that mistake into the forget about it bucket. Learn from it, but don't let your emotions or failure hurt you. And
I felt like that was a nice takeaway, a nice wrap up after your climax, after we learn about what happened in the game all those years ago, and now how it affected him, the ups and the emotional valences of happy and sad throughout that game. And now kind of on the far side of it, that sort of perspective that he has now. Mm-hmm. Did you kind of guide him in those questions in terms of the takeaway section, the very, very end, the denouement of the piece?
I really didn't. I know he's a motivational speaker, and I've heard him say the same kind of messages to all of his students so many times. So I think I had a good idea of what kind of answers he was going to give me. I asked like 4 questions, and then that's basically all that's in the final 2 or 3 minutes of that documentary.
You know, I've seen it screened in front of an audience twice with the first,
Mhm.
you know, in the class and then at the end of the semester. And oh, and I did show it this semester in class too.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if you've heard
heard.
if word got around, but I showed it as I wanted to make the students afraid coming into the new class to see a really good 15-minute documentary that could wind up on ESPN tomorrow as here, you know, fresh incoming freshmen here. This is what you got to aspire to. So now I've seen it 3 times, 2 times with people
Yeah.
who knew you, and the third time with pretty much cold, you know. And what you were able to accomplish, I think, was a very, very good beginning hook, and then get through the expositional material like we were talking about, and into the emotional part of it. Very, it felt effortlessly, you know. It felt like, oh, every kind of the pacing, the rhythm, the music that you layered in and intercutting between the game footage felt very natural. So was that something that you had to work at in the edit of getting that natural feel of the unfolding of the game, or is that just something that comes natural to you?
So the editing process is definitely one I'll never forget for this documentary, because I think the first 3 minutes, which is the exposition, which is the hook, took me like 3 weeks to edit. And I was kind of busy at the time. I should have probably freed up more time on my schedule looking back. But it took me like 3 weeks to edit, and then I had 2 weeks to edit the rest. And I was 3 minutes in, and I hadn't even gotten to him telling the game of the story.
The game of baseball is so wrought with failure that the greatest players in the history of the game fail 70% of the time. Baseball is a tough game. And so when you look at some of the greatest accomplishments of a player, Pete Rose hitting over 4,000 hits, someone like Ichiro who hits over 200 hits in a season, a hitter that hits for the cycle or hits 4 home runs in a game, those are feats that are rare and are hardly ever accomplished.
So I start finally editing that, and I am on a plane. I remember being on a plane back to Texas to film the B-roll, editing the beginning, starting that sequence and doing that on the way back. And then for the next 3 days, it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I stayed up all night Sunday going into Monday for our class. I edited the last 12 minutes of that documentary. And that was, you know, it was challenging, it was stressful, but it's my favorite editing experience ever, because you just kind of get into this groove, you get into this rhythm. And it's definitely a different experience than editing to like provoke what you want, whereas you have a voice, you have a literal voice guiding you through the edit. So that was helpful, but it was just one of those trances you get in when all your ideas just start working first try and you don't have to try different cuts. Like, so it was definitely a fun experience, a bit stressful. I think day 3 I started having some pretty bad technical issues, which kills me as an editor, but it was definitely a editing experience I'll never forget.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, you really, you displayed some sensibilities, I think, in terms of being able to know when to give us a moment to pause, to digest something that just happened. You know, when to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, how to find stock footage B-roll of other major league games or things like that to layer in. So yeah, it was really fun to watch. And so
No, thank you.
what's it been like at the festivals? Have you been able to attend the festivals?
I actually haven't attended most of them. I've attended around 4 or 5. And what's very fun for me is to see the audience reactions, because it's generally very similar, which means to me that I achieved what I want to achieve. There's moments where everyone's gasping, the moments where everyone's laughing, and then suddenly they stop laughing. Like, it's exactly what I wanted the audience to feel watching it. Like, people are screaming at the screen and stuff like that, which I think in a movie like this, like, that's exactly what you want. So that's always super fun. I've loved the reactions, and a lot of people seem very surprised that it is a 19-year-old filmmaker. Like, when I stepped up on the stage for the Q&A, and a lot of the questions are kind of directed at that. So it's definitely been, it's more, you know, I've never made a project that's been seen by this many people, and I'm just happy that people get from it what I want them to get from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you sit there and do the Q&As after the screening?
Yeah, for the ones I've attended, there's been stuff like that. The last one I went to was the Catalina Film Festival, which I went to like 2 weeks ago, which was definitely one of my favorites. They had like a red carpet, they had a few interviews there. So that one was very elaborate. So hopefully I did good in those, but it's fun to meet all the filmmakers from all these different backgrounds and share each other's work. So I do love going to festivals. I mean, it's so
Yeah,
fun.
it's kind of like a little club that you're in, because it's sort of it's like a little calling card. It's like, you're in the cool kids club if you have a film in the festival. I did when I was in grad school, I did the Catalina Film Festival, and
Really?
yeah, it was a lot of fun. Um, and
You
I
might have
remember they,
recommended to me actually.
yeah, maybe,
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
probable actually, because I know you gave me a few.
Right. I found it to be one of the funnest ones. When I was there, Stan Lee was still alive, and he did spoke at the finale of the festival. It was kind of cool
Yeah.
in
I think
that
they
big
still show
casino
they show
thing.
pictures of that still.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you got a chance to do it. What you'll learn, is that as you do more of these things, you'll learn that there's a little game that people play after the screenings of asking these questions and talking about the film. So I think it's just a fun experience to have. To get a chance to talk about your work, get a chance to see how people react to it,
hmm
and kind of meet other people from other schools or other aspiring filmmakers that are doing their short films. And so it's at the end of the day, the film world is kind of a small community. We call it town, like LA is like town, like are you
Yeah.
leave town, it's actually very small. In my career, I constantly run into the same people over and over and over everywhere I go.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you got a chance to start out like that. A lot of people don't get an experience like that until grad school. It's just, it's hit and miss with festivals. Some people, had, when I was in grad school, there's 20 of us in the grad class, and some people just didn't get into any festivals, and it was like,
Yeah.
really, you didn't get into any festivals. And, so it's kind of I don't know if it's subjective, or if it's based on when you apply, or who it is that's programming or something like that. But so if you can have the chance to experience that, I think it's great.
Yeah. What I think definitely helps Almost Perfect is that it is lighter. A lot of documentaries at festivals are very heavy and they deal with these extremely meaningful topics. So I don't like expect to win against those or even like want to win against those. But what I think that has helped it get in so many that we've put in just because I think it gives the audience a break in the midst of all these much darker topics, which I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, sports docs I think they're a really cool thing, because you have access to the footage in shot in a
Mhm.
way that would be, if this was a different story, maybe just as compelling of a story, but if it was in a different arena, you might not have that footage and the announcer announcing the game and all that stuff that you were able to show. Um, and I think that sports is a really profound window into the human condition.
Yeah,
It's a metaphor for the things that you're going through in life. The fact that there's chance and uncertainty, and you don't know, an expectation and result don't always work. And the idea of even in the midst of a disappointment, especially with baseball, where so much failure is in the sport, built into the
sure.
sport of baseball. It's and randomness. You could do your job, and then you could still have something random happen. It teaches you about how to orient yourself in life when you don't know what's going to happen in your life.
hmm
Um, so that's why I think it's interesting that you can have, a 19-year-old making a film that can say something to, a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, that's profound enough for even them to say, so it doesn't have to, when you're tapping into a larger system of meaning, which is through this tradition of the sport, through the sort of wisdom of the baseball coach, um, you can actually sort of tap into this larger system of meaning that's going to be meaningful to people, even beyond what you thought up in your own head, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Baseball definitely prepared me, I think, for filmmaking in a lot of ways, just because when you step on set, you can be assured that something's going to go wrong. You don't know what it's going to be, but something's going to go wrong. You're going to have to pivot. And I think it's Peter Jackson. I might be wrong, and I'm going to mess up the quote, but he says something along the lines of, if you make 80% of the movie that you thought of in your head, you've had a massive success. And I think that's definitely stuck with me as a filmmaker, because so much is going to go wrong. So all you can do is hope that you get close to your vision, but you're never actually going to fulfill your vision. So I think that's the whole theme of the documentary. It's about the value of imperfection and trying to be perfect, but there's more to be learned from not being perfect.
Back and forth. Look at that. You're such a good catcher. Don't drop a bit. I'm worried about this.
Well, I hope that when people watch the movie, they realize that there's a lot of adversity in baseball and a lot of adversity in life, and that you just have to battle through it and grind through it to get to that level of perfection that you want to attain.
With this documentary, I hope to thoroughly entertain, evoke big emotions, and inspire those who watch it.
Isn't that fun?
Brian Holman taught me a lot about baseball as well as life. This documentary strives to capture a few of those lessons. I hope you enjoy the story.
Well, cool, man. I'm really happy that it worked out for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any aspirations for sports, working in sports docs or anything more in that vein in the future?
I've considered it. I actually reached out to like the Mariners this past summer to see if I could get something up there. Didn't really work out, but we did negotiate some stuff to where we could see the documentary actually screened on the Jumbotron on April 17th. And then they broadcasted it live on their regional sports network on the 20th, and then for the anniversary of the game. So stuff like that. So I've negotiated with the MLB a little, and they gave us the licenses for free, which is also really nice. I think a lot of that sticks to Brian, honestly, but I would be interested in doing it. I love sports movies. I love sports documentaries. The DP of this movie is Joel Corll. I don't know if you know him, but like that's his entire goal. So it was really nice to get to bring him on this project.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, excellent job, man. I will, if you have anything to put up in terms of festivals that you're still going to do, or any link or something like that would allow people to kind of connect with your project and follow it when it finally does come out for public consumption, I'll put it in the link here. Just go ahead and send that to me. And I'm again, happy that that it worked out for you, and we're all excited about seeing what you do next. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for your class, because I think that also really helped me in the process as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, I like to try to work on the idea as much as possible before you start spending your energy on the actual shooting and editing, and so I think you had a pretty solid idea by the time you started shooting. So that was good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Ben. We will we'll all be waiting to see what you do next. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.